Welcome to DucBloke Tuning and Finding the Sweet Spot. Grab a cup of coffee and like and subscribe.
And welcoming you back to DucBloke Tuning, Finding the Sweet Spot. Today I have a very special video. I got in the Thieaudio Origin. I've been a big fan and supporter of Thieaudio. I have the Monarch. I've had that for a year. I have the Legacy 5 and the Legacy 2. I have an Oracle Mark II, and now I have the Origin. I'm going to be comparing this with the Monarch Mark III. So I've had a few people contacting me on the channel asking if I could set up some sort of a comparison because I own the Monarch Mark III once the Origin came in. I wanted to do a very thorough comparison of the two units. I'm going to start off with unboxing. I'm going to show you what's inside the box because it is a little bit different, but the IEMs are very similar. So here we have the Origin. It's got one dynamic driver, two electrostatic drivers, 4 BAs, and 1 bone conduction. And I know that the Monarch Mark III has 6 BAs, 2 DDs, and 2 electrostats. It's similar, but it has more BA drivers and it has one more dynamic driver. The price, $150 more for this one. This is a little bit cheaper over the Monarch. Let's dig into it. Take the sleeves off both boxes. Let's open them up. They are still the same size box, but they have changed the printing on the front of it. Here's what's inside. Apologize, let's do this so we get better light. You can see inside the old Monarch Mark III is the same case that they would give you, let's say, with the Oracle, as well as the Monarch Mark I, Mark II, and the Mark III. I have the disco shells, so these are the shiny bling bling shells, so it's a little bit more pricey. This is the cable that comes with the Monarch. The Monarch is a 4-core twist cable that is modular. I don't use this cable, even though it's a nice cable. It's very plush. It's very compliant. I don't like press-on modular plugs. I like plugs that are a little bit smaller if they're modular and actually attach firmly with a thread or some sort of a latch. So I don't actually use this cable on this unit. On the Thieaudio, shells are presented the same way inside the box on the Origin, but the cable is a 2-core, and it's a thick 2-core, and again it has a modular plug. When I put the plug onto this cable, push-on plug, it also is quite long once it's attached. So we're going to show you that as well as we do this unboxing. What is different is the puck. The case that comes with this is now a round puck that can fit in your pocket, whereas the older style for the Monarch, put these on top here, the older style for the Monarch was the large rectangular case. All right, comes with a cleaning cloth, comes with several different tips, right, and it comes with the modular plugs, which are here. This comes with 3 different types. It comes with a 2.5, a 3.5, and a 4.4. Whereas the Origin, again, comes with 2 sets of tips, both foam and silicone, but it only comes with 2 because no one's using a 2.5 anymore, so it's kind of a waste of money. But look at how long it is. Thieaudio has always been known for making these long plugs that are just not very friendly when you have a DAP and you want to put it in your pocket or be mobile. So put that on there. You can see how long that plug is. It's quite long. Even though this cable is really nice, I don't think it's very compliant, by the way. I think it has a lot of memory. Even though it's a nice cable, I don't like the fact that it's this long, and I'm not going to use it with this IEM. If I take the shells out, again being careful because you can't get them from behind, you can see that the shells are quite beautiful on this set. They've got a little bit of sparkle. Okay, I'm going to pop this off so that I can show you the difference between this shell and the Monarch. So again, let's bring in front of the computer and start comparing these two. And now that you've seen the unboxing, I've talked about the plugs. They are different in size and quite long because they're modular. So this is the Monarch Mark III. Right there is where the plugs insert together. They're just an interference fit. It actually clips together quite well where that knurling is.
This is the origin. The origin doesn't clip on. It clips on down here. It doesn't clip on quite as tightly, and it's also longer. You can see right here that lines up with that, lines up with that pretty much. You can see that it's about 3 to 4 millimeters longer at the bottom of the plug. And the plugs that I like to use, which are not interchangeable, you can see how much shorter they are. And that's important to me for when I'm using large DAPs and the cables have to bend around. This stops the cables from creating too much, let's say, tension on the joint. That's why I'm not using the modular plugs with either of these. I'm using a different cable. And remember I talked about the cable having memory? You can see all three of the cables laid out on the table. This is my aftermarket cable that I'm using for both the Monarch and the Origin. You can see the Origin cable has so much memory that it lifts off the table. It's quite stiff. And then this is the 4-core Monarch Mark III cable. It lays pretty flat. It's got a little bit of memory, but it is a better cable than the Origin cable, although the Origin cable looks really good. These are the cables that I actually settled on. I've got a nice blue cable here, goes very well with the Origin, and then I've got this purple cable, it's a bit of bling, that goes with the sparkly disco shells. This is in my squig link, which is ducbloke.squig.link, the signature Thieaudio bass tuck. We're starting to see this more and more in the industry where they tuck in the bass. This really helps with the male vocals, and then it flattens out through the mids, and then you see it rise gently through the pinna gain. And you can see the treble extension here and the up and downs that in the Origin. And the number of times this bounces up and down, we're going to talk about this a little bit later in a video. The number of times that this oscillates usually indicates how much texture you're going to get out of that IEM because of how many drivers it has. This is my target, my base 3 target. In my project, when I tune any of these IEMs, I use an array of targets to go through the tuning process, but this is a neutral tuning base 3 target that I have loaded into SquigLink, and I wanted to show you that it aligns fairly well with the Origin. So the dotted line is very close. You can see there's a little bit less in the 100 to 200 range than I prefer, so I wanted to pull that down. You'll see that later. And then the bass is pretty spot on as far as the bass level, and then the pinna gain area is very close. These are the Origin and Monarch overlaid. Now you have both IEMs on top of each other in SquigLink. So that's the 4 dB elevation in the bass section. This is the Monarch Mark III's bass tuck at about 180 hertz as compared to 250 hertz on the Origin. And then the Origin has less pinna gain in it than the Monarch Mark III. But it also is noticeably warmer in the treble region. Now I'm going to show you Rue, where we've taken both of these graphs, the blue being the Origin, the red being the Monarch. You can see that I've now taken this to 400, but let's bring it back to 1,000 hertz to separate these out. This will help us to look at where this bass tuck is actually happening. So you can see the bass tuck on the Monarch Mark III is happening somewhere around 180 hertz. And then the bass tuck, and there's the cursor, that's the bass tuck at 180 hertz. And then you can see the bass tuck on the Origin is happening at around 146 hertz, and that actually does play into how these perform in the lower mids. Now we're going over to the treble region, bounces up and down. Like I said, it oscillates up and down, and the number of times that it actually oscillates is kind of important. So here's a zoom of the treble region where we've cut it off from 1,000 all the way up to 20,000 hertz. The pinna gain meets at about 2,600 hertz. What we're going to do next is actually count the number of up and down oscillations each one of these has. And there's a difference in the driver count between the Monarch and the Origin. The Monarch has about 8 oscillations in total, whereas the Origin has 6 oscillations. So there's 2 additional oscillations. And that's no surprise because the Monarch has 2 additional BAs, 6 BAs, and the Origin has 4. So that kind of makes sense. I'm going to actually separate these out so you can see it a little bit better. Here we have the Monarch, and again you can see here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 oscillations. Again, adding a lot of texture. And now we're going back over to the Origin, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 less oscillations. Now I'm going to show you a video where I want to explain what's happening in the gain. And what I've done here is you equalize, when you're doing your testing, you want to get this to about 85 dB. So it's at 84.5 dB. This is the volume level that's going through the origin right now. And then what I've done is I've taken the frequency and I've lowered it from 1,000, which is what you normally put it in at, and I've increased that to 20 hertz, which is the sub-bass region. And you can see how this has jumped up by about 3.5 dB. This is showing the dB elevation that you saw on the graph. And then we put it at 300, and you can see that this is only elevated by about half a dB. But if I drop this back down to 200, let's see what happens. You'll see this start to rise. At 200 hertz, I've gone up another half a dB. This is that later bass tuck that's happening on the origin. So now we're in the Monarch, and you can see the Monarch needs more gain because it starts out at the same level, at the 61 level on the volume. It starts out at a lower value. It starts out at 80. So I had to increase the volume here to get this back up to about 84.5, which is what I had it at for the origin. So here it comes back up, and now we're close enough. We're at 84.4, but I've had to bring the volume up significantly, about 6 steps, which means it's more power hungry. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this from 1,000 hertz. I'm going to bring it down to 20. And you can see the elevation in bass is only about 1.5 dB that's happened here versus the origin, which again went about 3.5 dB higher. So I know that there's a 3 dB separation at that frequency. Now I'm going to repeat what I did here with the 300 hertz level, and it's actually a little bit lower. There's actually a tilt down from 1,000 to 300 where it drops by about a dB. Then we're going to put it at 200, and you're going to see what happens here. This remains flat. It starts to rise just a little bit, but you can see that the tuck, like I was explaining it, actually happens at about 180. So I drop this down to 150, and all of a sudden we start to see this number come up. So we now know where the tuck is on the Monarch. It's at about 180, and the tuck on the origin happens at about 240. Now we're going to talk about, done is I've gone in and I've found my perfect EQ settings, and I've listened to 30 different songs and chosen each EQ setting that suits it best for each song. And the origin started out in the neutral position at what I would call a bass 3. It only required a little bit of additional bass, and it stayed on the neutral setting. So that Pina gain that was following my target actually followed this really well. So neutral bass 4 was what I ended up at before I did my final tweaks after listening to 30 songs on the origin. Same thing on the Monarch Mark III. Listen to 30 songs. The Monarch actually has less bass out of the box. This was what I would call a bass 2, and I'd call it in between a neutral to bright. About 2/3 of the songs I listened to were better on my slightly brighter setting in the PEQs, and about 1/3 better at the neutral position. I actually modified this to be right in the middle, customize it. And where I do that is in the K19. This is where if I take the final output from that 30 song listen and I put it into the software manually, where I can adjust the PEQ values live. I can grab the dot, let's say 8, I can hold on to this and move it around while I'm listening and make my final adjustments based on the sound that I'm hearing from another library of songs. So I did this. This is the EQ setting. I'll put it up. This is the actual image of this, the full image. You can see that the origin required very little bass lift. It required me to pull down the lower mids. Like I was saying, it was a little bit too warm, let's say in the lower midsection, which creates a thicker vocal, not as detailed vocal, especially in male vocals. Here's what was tuned in the upper regions to add a little bit more brightness to it, where it was down in that mid treble region, and then to pull down the final upper treble region. This is the graph again for the Monarch. The Monarch graph, you can see I've added a lot more bass. I haven't had to do that tuck because it already exists in the Monarch in the vocal region between 100 and 200 hertz. And that's a very critical region for really getting those vocals right. Now on to the spider graphs. This is what most people wanted to see. The Thieaudio Origin before and after EQ setting. Blue line is before I added EQ to it. The red line is after EQ and what was improved. And what's notable and what sticks out here is the tonality. And the tonality, again, of those male vocals between that 100 and 200 region was really made better by pulling that down slightly. And you can see that right here. The lower mids were a 8.69, and then this was brought up to a 9.19. This is the most critical thing that happened to this during the tuning. And this also elevated the final score from being an 8.99 to a 9.17. Very good IEM. It is in the total region. Anything that's above 9 to me is a total. We were able to improve the lower mids, the upper mids, the lower treble, the upper treble, a little bit of soundstage, much more detail. Again, it comes down to this region right here. We added more detail from that lower mid section. Sibilance and slam and note weight and masking and the bass feel. Those remain the same because those were pretty good out of the box. Next one is the Monarch. The Monarch scored a 9.13 out of the box and a 9.52 after the PEQ tuning. It really is an all-rounder. It's very good out of the box, but I was able to elevate just about every attribute of the Monarch by adding PEQ, except for, say, the masking and the layering. Everything else was elevated. This is the Monarch before PEQ was applied versus the Origin. And like we were saying before, the Origin has slightly better sub bass and bass. It has a little bit better bass feel. Everything else is slightly reduced, except for, say, the layering, the masking, the note weight, and the slam. But the sibilance, the timbre, the tonality, and the texture, especially the tonality, were much better on the Monarch Mark III out of the box. And again, that tonality was related to that lower midsection here where the Origin needed a little bit of work. This is the Monarch Mark III and Origin after, and the lower mids, the upper mids, the lower treble, the upper treble, especially the upper treble, were much better than the Origin after the PEQ was applied. Detail was enhanced over the Origin. The note weight, the slam, the tonality, although the tonality did come up on the Origin quite well, the Monarch still beat it out. And then the timbre and the color were better on the Monarch Mark III. Here's our final totals, and I'll throw up the image here so that you can see this a little bit better. Sub bass out of the box, I think the Origin is slightly better in the sub bass region. The Origin definitely wins in the bass region and the bass feel out of the box. Similar soundstage, similar sibilance, similar slam. The Monarch Mark III, I believe, is better in the lower mids, upper mids, lower treble, upper treble. Soundstage, again, it's similar. The detail is better. The layering is similar. The sibilance is similar. The slam is similar. The note weight is similar. The tonality is better, and the texture is better on the Monarch Mark III. After the PEQ settings are applied, this is the big reveal. I think that the Monarch Mark III wins just about every possible category versus the Origin. And if you look at things like ergonomics, I think they're the same. In the unboxing, I showed you that the shells were very similar. The cable stiffness on the Origin, didn't really like that. The memory that was in the cable, the plug being longer, didn't really like that. It looks great. I mean, it looks like you're looking at the universe through a telescope. So there's nothing wrong with its looks. The case, definite winner. The case that comes with the Origin, you can see here, it's a nice suede puck that can fit into your pocket, but there's no way you can take the case from the Monarch Mark III and put that into your pocket. It's quite large. The cable on this one is a 4-core. It is better. The plug is shorter by about 3 millimeters again. Looks, if you get the custom shells, which there's a lot of options for customizing the shells in this, I think this looks stunning. You know, the disco shells are quite bling. The case is too large, and the price is $150 more. It's not like you're comparing apples to apples here, especially since when I bought this, it was during the 11/11 sale, and I got it for $700 because I had a $50 coupon with Linsol. If you're smart, you know, you're going to save yourself $300. So $300 difference between these. Is this $300 better, especially with the disco shells? Is it $400? $500 better than the Origin? Probably not. The Origin definitely is a strong contender in the sub 1,000 range. But if you've got $1,000 to spend, the Thieaudio Monarch Mark IIIs are still, and I rated them my #1 IEM for 2023, are still at the top of the list. And with that, thank you so much for being part of the community. Please like and subscribe. I want to grow the channel. I know that a lot of people have been waiting for this video, so it should get a lot of views. If you followed this through to the end, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll continue to grow.
Thank you for visiting DucBloke Tuning and finding the sweet spot. Your comments are very much appreciated. I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. Share the PEQ settings with you if you own these particular IEMs or if you plan on purchasing them to maximize your investment. Again, thank you so much for supporting the project.